The old pickup truck coughed and wheezed as it struggled up the mountain road. 8-year-old Emma pressed her face against the cold window, watching the snow fall harder with each passing mile. Her twin brother Jake sat beside her, clutching a worn teddy bear that had seen better days. "Are we almost there, Mom?" Emma asked, her breath fogging up the glass. Their mother, Sarah, glanced in the rearview mirror with tired eyes. Dark circles shadowed her face and her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. "Just a little further, sweetheart. Grandpa's cabin is just over this mountain." Sarah had lost her job at the diner 3 weeks ago. The bills kept piling up, and the landlord had given them until the end of the month to pay rent or leave. Her father's old cabin in the mountains was their only option now. It had been empty for 2 years since he passed away, but at least it was shelter. The twins didn't know how desperate their situation really was. Sarah had sold almost everything they owned just to put gas in the truck and buy some groceries. The $23 in her wallet was all the money they had left in the world. "Look at all the snow." Jake pointed out his window excitedly. "We can build snowmen tomorrow." Emma giggled and pressed her small hand against the cold glass. "And snow angels. Can we make snow angels, Mom?" "Of course, babies." Sarah managed to smile, though worry gnawed at her stomach. The weather report had mentioned a storm coming, but she hadn't expected it to be this bad. The snow was falling so thick now that she could barely see the road ahead. The truck's engine made a strange grinding noise, and Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. "Come on, old girl," she whispered to the truck. "Just get us there safely." They had been driving for 4 hours already, and the twins were getting restless. Emma started humming a song their father used to sing to them before he left. Jake joined in, and soon both children were singing softly in the back seat. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes as she listened to their innocent voices. The road grew steeper and more winding. Pine trees heavy with snow lined both sides, creating a tunnel of white. The truck's headlights cut through the falling snow, but visibility was getting worse by the minute. "I'm hungry, Mom," Jake said quietly. "I know, sweetie. We'll eat as soon as we get to Grandpa's cabin. There's soup in the bag." Sarah had bought 2 cans of soup and a loaf of bread. It would have to last them until she figured out what to do next. Maybe she could find work in the small mountain town. Maybe things would get better. The truck suddenly lurched to one side, and Sarah fought to keep control of the steering wheel. They had hit a patch of ice hidden under the snow. Her heart pounded as she managed to straighten the vehicle. "Whoa," Emma laughed, thinking it was fun. "Do that again." "Let's not do that again," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice light despite her fear. The snow was really coming down now, thick and heavy. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up, making a rhythmic squeaking sound. Sarah leaned forward, squinting through the white curtain that seemed to surround them. She almost missed the turnoff to her father's property. A small, snow-covered sign, barely visible through the storm, marked the dirt road that led up to the cabin. Sarah turned carefully, feeling the truck's tires slip slightly on the snowy ground. The dirt road was even more treacherous than the main highway. It wound upward through thick forest, and Sarah could feel the truck struggling with each turn. Snow had drifted across parts of the road, making it difficult to tell where the path was supposed to be. "Are we lost?" Emma asked, pressing her face against the window again. "No, honey. Grandpa's cabin is just up this road. I used to come here when I was little, just like you." Sarah remembered happier times when her father was alive, when money wasn't a constant worry, when the future seemed bright and full of possibilities. Now, at 28, she felt like she had aged 10 years in the past few months. The truck's engine coughed again, more violently this time. Sarah pressed the gas pedal, but the engine only sputtered in response. A terrible grinding noise filled the air, and then suddenly the truck rolled to a complete stop. "Why did we stop, Mom?" Jake asked, looking around with wide eyes. Sarah turned the key, but nothing happened. She tried again, pumping the gas pedal desperately. The engine was completely dead. They were stranded on a mountain road in the middle of a snowstorm with 2 young children and almost no supplies. Fighting back panic, Sarah looked around. Through the heavy snow, she could barely make out the shapes of trees. She had no idea how far they were from the cabin or how far back to the main road. Her cell phone had no signal this high up in the mountains. "Mom?" Emma's voice was smaller now, sensing something was wrong. "It's okay, sweetheart," Sarah said, though her voice shook slightly. "The truck just needs to rest for a minute." But even as she spoke, Sarah could feel the temperature dropping inside the truck. Snow was piling up on the windshield, and the wind outside was getting stronger. She pulled the twins closer to her in the front seat. wrapping her thin coat around all three of them. The storm showed no signs of stopping. In fact, it seemed to be getting worse. Snow swirled around the truck like a white tornado, and the wind howled through the trees with an eerie sound that made Jake move closer to his mother. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to think. They had a little food, but no way to stay warm if the truck got too cold. No one knew where they were. She hadn't told anyone about their plan to go to her father's cabin, because she was too ashamed to admit how desperate their situation had become. As the snow continued to fall and the wind continued to howl, Sarah held her children close and prayed that somehow, some way, they would make it through the night. Hours passed and the storm grew worse. Sarah watched helplessly as snow piled higher and higher around their truck. The windows were almost completely covered now, creating a small cave of warmth that was quickly growing cold. Emma and Jake had fallen asleep curled up against their mother, but Sarah couldn't close her eyes. Every few minutes she would start the truck and run the heater for a few minutes to warm them up, but she was terrified of running out of gas completely. The wind outside sounded like a wild animal, howling and shaking the truck. Sarah had never experienced a mountain storm this severe. Tree branches scraped against the roof, and she could hear the groaning of wood bending in the fierce wind. Around midnight, Jake woke up shivering. "Mom, I'm cold," he whispered, his teeth chattering. Sarah pulled him closer and rubbed his small hands between hers. They were ice cold despite her efforts to keep him warm. Emma stirred too, mumbling in her sleep. "I know, baby. Try to go back to sleep." But Sarah knew they were in serious trouble. The temperature inside the truck was dropping fast, and she could see her breath in small white puffs. The children's lips were starting to look blue, and no amount of rubbing seemed to warm their hands and feet. She tried the truck engine again, but this time it wouldn't even turn over. They were completely stranded with no heat and no way to call for help. "Mom?" Emma opened her eyes and looked around, confused. "Why is it so cold?" "The heater is just taking a break, sweetie. Come here." Sarah pulled both children as close as possible, trying to share whatever body heat she had left. She opened the glove compartment and found an old emergency blanket her father had left there. It was thin and crinkled, but it was better than nothing. The snow continued to fall throughout the night. Sarah dozed fitfully, jolting awake every few minutes to check on the children. Their breathing was shallow, and they seemed to be getting weaker as the hours passed. By dawn, the storm had calmed slightly, but they were completely buried. Sarah could barely see daylight through the thick layer of snow covering the windows. When she tried to open the door, it wouldn't budge. They were trapped inside. Jake started crying weakly. "I want to go home, Mom. I don't like it here." "I know, sweetheart. We'll get out of here soon, I promise." But Sarah didn't know how she could keep that promise. They had eaten the last of their crackers during the night, and the children needed food and warmth. She had never felt so helpless in her entire life. Around noon, Emma became very quiet and stopped responding when Sarah talked to her. Her skin was pale and cold to the touch. Jake wasn't much better. Both children were showing signs of serious hypothermia. Sarah knew she had to do something drastic. She couldn't just sit there and watch her children freeze to death. Using her keys and anything else she could find, she began scraping at the snow covering the driver's side window. It took over an hour, but she finally managed to create a small opening. Cold air rushed in, but at least she could see outside. The world was completely white, with snowdrifts that reached above the truck's roof in some places. She tried honking the horn, hoping someone might hear, but the sound seemed to disappear into the vast white wilderness around them. There was no sign of life anywhere, no smoke from distant chimneys, no sounds of other vehicles. The sun was shining now, making the snow sparkle like diamonds, but it provided no warmth. Sarah realized they might not survive another night in these conditions. She made a desperate decision. Taking off her own coat, she wrapped it around both children, leaving herself in just a thin sweater. If she was going to save them, she needed to stay awake and alert, even if it meant risking her own life. "Emma? Jake, can you hear me?" Sarah gently shook her children, trying to keep them conscious. Emma's eyes fluttered open briefly. "I'm tired, Mom, so tired." "I know, baby, but you need to stay awake for me, okay? Can you sing that song Daddy used to sing? The one about the sunshine?" Jake tried to sing, but his voice was barely a whisper. Both children were losing their fight against the cold, and Sarah felt panic rising in her chest like a tide. She had failed them. After everything she had tried to do to protect them, to give them a better life, she had brought them to this frozen mountain where they were going to die. Tears froze on her cheeks as she held her children close. She began to pray harder than she had ever prayed before, begging God or anyone who might be listening to please save her babies. The afternoon sun began to fade, and Sarah knew that when darkness came, it would bring even colder temperatures. They had maybe a few hours left before the situation became completely hopeless. That's when she heard it, a low rumbling sound in the distance. At first she thought it might be the wind, but then she realized it was getting closer and more distinct. It sounded like a vehicle, a powerful one with a strong engine. Sarah's heart began to race. She pressed her face against the small opening she had created and strained to see through the snow. The sound was definitely getting louder, but she couldn't see anything yet. She began honking the horn frantically, using all her remaining strength to press the button over and over. The weak sound of their truck's horn echoed across the snowy landscape. "Please see us," she thought desperately. "Please find us." The rumbling grew stronger, and finally, through the blowing snow, Sarah saw lights approaching. Two bright headlights cut through the white landscape like beacons of hope. Someone was coming. After nearly 18 hours trapped in the snow, help was finally on the way. Sarah shook her children gently, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Wake up, babies. Someone's coming to help us." The massive black SUV came to a stop just 20 feet from their buried truck. Through her small window opening, Sarah watched as the driver's door opened and a tall man stepped out into the deep snow. He was wearing an expensive-looking winter coat and sturdy boots that suggested he was prepared for this kind of weather. The man looked around for a moment, scanning the area until his eyes found their truck. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the concern on his face as he realized the severity of their situation. He waded through the snow toward them, moving with purpose and determination. When he reached the truck, he brushed snow away from the windshield and peered inside. "Hello?" he called out, his voice strong and reassuring. "Are you all right in there?" Sarah tried to respond, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. She was weak from the cold and exhaustion. Instead, she tapped on the glass to let him know they were alive. The man immediately began digging around the driver's side door with his hands, clearing away the packed snow. He worked quickly and efficiently, as if he had experience with emergency situations. "My name is Marcus," he called out as he worked. "I'm going to get you out of there." "How many people are inside?" "3, Sarah managed to croak out. "2 children. Marcus's movements became even more urgent. He pulled out his cell phone and made a quick call. Sarah couldn't hear everything he said, but she caught words like emergency, hypothermia, and children. After several minutes of digging, Marcus was able to pull open the driver's door. Cold air rushed in, but Sarah had never been so happy to see another human being. "Ma'am, we need to get you and your children warm immediately," Marcus said, his voice calm but serious. "Can you walk?" Sarah tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't support her. She had been sitting in the cold truck for too long, and her body wasn't responding properly. Without hesitation, Marcus scooped up Jake in his arms. The little boy was barely conscious, his lips blue and his breathing shallow. "I'll come back for your daughter and you," Marcus said, already moving toward his SUV. "My vehicle has heat and blankets." Sarah watched him carry her son through the snow. Jake looked so small and fragile in the stranger's arms. Marcus moved carefully but quickly, making sure not to slip in the deep snow. He placed Jake gently in the back seat of his SUV, which Sarah could see was running with heat blasting. Then he immediately returned for Emma. Emma was even less responsive than her brother. When Marcus picked her up, she didn't even open her eyes. Her small body was limp and cold, and Sarah felt a stab of terror that they might be too late. "She's going to be okay," Marcus said, noticing Sarah's expression. "We got here in time." Finally, he came back for Sarah. She tried to walk on her own, but her legs gave out after just a few steps. Marcus caught her before she could fall and helped her to his SUV. The warmth inside the vehicle was overwhelming after so many hours in the cold. Sarah felt tears of relief streaming down her face as she saw her children wrapped in thick, warm blankets in the back seat. Marcus handed her a thermos of hot coffee and another blanket. "Drink this slowly," he instructed. "It will help warm you from the inside." The coffee was the best thing Sarah had ever tasted. She could feel warmth spreading through her body with each sip. "Who are you?" she asked, still not quite believing their rescue was real. Marcus smiled gently. Just someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time. I own a cabin about 2 miles up the road. I was coming back from town when I saw your truck. He was being modest, Sarah realized. This man had saved their lives. Without him, she and her children would have frozen to death in that truck. The children need to get to a hospital, Marcus said, checking his phone. The main road is still closed because of the storm, but I know another way down the mountain. It'll take longer, but we can get through. Emma stirred slightly and opened her eyes. Mom, she whispered weakly. I'm here, baby. We're safe now. Jake was starting to show some color in his cheeks, and his breathing was becoming stronger. The warmth was working, bringing them back from the edge of hypothermia. As they drove down the mountain, Marcus kept checking on them in the rearview mirror. He drove carefully but steadily, navigating roads that would have been impossible for Sarah's old truck even in good weather. I don't know how to thank you, Sarah said, her voice still shaky. You saved our lives. No need to thank me, Marcus replied. I'm just glad I found you when I did. But Sarah could see that he was being humble. This man had expensive clothes, a luxury SUV equipped for mountain driving, and the confidence of someone who was used to taking charge in difficult situations. He wasn't just anyone. He was someone with means and resources who had chosen to use them to help strangers in need. The drive to the hospital took 2 hours on winding back roads, but Marcus never complained or showed any sign of impatience. He kept the heat running high and made sure the children stayed comfortable. When they finally reached the hospital, Marcus carried both children inside while Sarah followed on unsteady legs. He spoke quickly to the emergency room staff, explaining the situation and making sure Emma and Jake got immediate attention. The doctors confirmed what Marcus had suspected. All 3 of them were suffering from hypothermia, but they had been rescued in time. With proper treatment and warming, they would make a full recovery. As the medical staff worked, Marcus quietly stepped aside, but he didn't leave. He stayed in the waiting room, making phone calls and handling details that Sarah was too exhausted to deal with. Sarah realized she didn't even know this man's last name, but he had literally saved her family's life. She watched him through the window of the treatment room, wondering what kind of person drops everything to help complete strangers and then stays to make sure they're okay. When the doctor told her the children would be fine but needed to stay overnight for observation, Sarah felt relief wash over her. They were safe. Her babies were going to be okay. But as reality set in, she began to worry about other things. Hospital bills, the broken truck, the fact that they had nowhere to go and no money to get there. Their problems weren't over, they were just beginning. The next morning, Emma and Jake were feeling much better. The color had returned to their cheeks and they were chattering excitedly about their adventure to the nurses. Children have an amazing ability to bounce back, and they seemed to have forgotten how scared they had been. Sarah, however, was facing a harsh reality. The hospital social worker, Mrs. Peterson, had come to speak with her about their situation. I understand you don't have insurance, Mrs. Peterson said gently, reviewing the paperwork on her clipboard. Sarah nodded, feeling ashamed. I lost my job a few weeks ago. We were trying to get to my father's cabin, but the truck broke down. The hospital bill for 3 people treated for hypothermia, plus an overnight stay, is going to be substantial, Mrs. Peterson explained. We have programs that might help, but you'll need to fill out extensive paperwork and provide documentation of your financial situation. Sarah's heart sank. She had $23 to her name. How could she possibly pay a hospital bill that would likely be thousands of dollars? There's also the matter of temporary housing, Mrs. Peterson continued. Child Services requires that you have adequate shelter before the children can be discharged. We were going to stay at my father's cabin, but I don't know if our truck can be repaired, and I don't have money for a tow truck. Mrs. Peterson made notes on her clipboard. Sarah could see the concern in her eyes. Without transportation or money, they were in an impossible situation. That's when Marcus appeared in the doorway. Sarah hadn't seen him since the night before, but he looked like he hadn't slept much. He was carrying 2 large bags and had a gentle smile on his face. Good morning, he said. I hope everyone is feeling better today. Emma and Jake's faces lit up when they saw him. It's the man who saved us, Emma announced proudly. Marcus laughed and pulled small toys out of one of his bags, handing them to each child. Jake got a stuffed bear, and Emma received a pretty doll with blonde hair like hers. "I thought you might be getting bored in here," he said. Sarah watched in amazement as this stranger continued to show kindness to her family. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "I wanted to," Marcus replied simply. Mrs. Peterson cleared her throat. "Mr. Williams, I was just explaining to Mrs. Sarah about the challenges she's facing with housing and medical bills." Sarah noticed that Mrs. Peterson seemed to recognize Marcus and spoke to him with a certain level of respect. She wondered who exactly this man was. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Mrs. Peterson, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" They stepped outside the room and Sarah could see them talking through the window. Though she couldn't hear what they were saying, Mrs. Peterson's expression changed several times during their conversation, from surprise to concern to what looked like relief. When they returned, Mrs. Peterson was smiling. "Mrs. Sarah, Mr. Williams has made arrangements to settle your hospital bill and has offered to help with your transportation situation." Sarah stared at Marcus in shock. "I can't let you do that. I don't even know you. You've already done so much." "It's already done," Marcus said quietly. "The important thing is that you and your children are safe and can get back on your feet." "But why? Why would you help strangers like this?" Marcus sat down in the chair next to Sarah's bed. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked a little uncomfortable, as if he was deciding how much to share. "A few years ago, I was in a very different place in my life," he said slowly. "I had money and success, but I had lost touch with what really mattered. I was so focused on business and making more money that I forgot about the people around me." He paused, looking at Emma and Jake playing with their new toys. "I lost someone very important to me because I was too busy to pay attention to what she needed. After that, I made a promise to myself to never ignore someone who needed help when I had the power to provide it." Sarah could hear the sadness in his voice and realized there was much more to his story than he was sharing. "Your truck has been towed to a repair shop in town," Marcus continued, changing the subject back to practical matters. "The mechanic says it needs a new engine, which would cost more than the truck is worth." Sarah's heart sank again. Without the truck, they had no way to get anywhere. "However," Marcus said, "I have a proposal. I own several rental properties in town, and one of them is currently empty. It's a small house with 2 bedrooms, nothing fancy, but it's warm and safe. You and the children could stay there while you get back on your feet." Sarah couldn't speak. This man was offering them a home. "I don't have money to pay rent," she whispered. "We can work something out. Maybe you could help manage some of my other properties or work in one of my businesses. The point is, you and the children need a safe place to live, and I have one available." Mrs. Peterson was nodding approvingly. "This sounds like an excellent temporary solution." Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Are you rich?" she asked with the innocent directness that only children possess. Marcus chuckled. "I've been very fortunate in my life, Emma. If you're rich, why don't you live in a big castle like in my storybooks?" "Because castles get very lonely," Marcus replied seriously. "Sometimes the most important things in life aren't things you can buy." Sarah watched the way he interacted with her children. He spoke to them like they were real people, not just kids to be dismissed. There was something gentle and sad about him that made her wonder what tragedy he had referenced earlier. "I can't accept this," Sarah said finally. "It's too much. You don't owe us anything." "You're right, I don't owe you anything," Marcus agreed. "But sometimes people help each other simply because it's the right thing to do. You would do the same for someone else if you could, wouldn't you?" Sarah knew he was right. If she had the means to help a family in need, she wouldn't hesitate. "Besides," Marcus added with a smile, "Emma and Jake have promised to show me how to build a proper snowman. And I've never learned how to do that," Jake giggled. "It's easy. You just roll the snow into big balls." "Well then, I definitely need your help," Marcus said seriously. Looking at her children's happy faces and thinking about the warm, safe house Marcus was offering, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, things were finally going to get better. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the kitchen of the small house Marcus had provided, making breakfast for her children. Sunlight streamed through clean windows, and she could hear Emma and Jake laughing in the living room as they played with the toys Marcus continued to bring them. The house was perfect for their needs. It had 2 bedrooms, a cozy living room with a fireplace and a kitchen that was small but functional. Marcus had made sure it was fully furnished and stocked with groceries when they arrived. Sarah had started working as a property manager for Marcus's rental businesses. It wasn't glamorous work, but she was good at it, and Marcus paid her fairly. For the first time in months, she could buy groceries without counting every penny, and could sleep at night without worrying about where they would live. But the more time she spent around Marcus, the more questions she had about him. He lived alone in a large, beautiful house on the mountain, but she never saw friends or family visit him. He worked constantly, managing various businesses and investments, but he never seemed to enjoy the success he had achieved. The children adored him. Emma had started calling him Uncle Marcus, and Jake followed him around whenever he visited, asking endless questions about everything from cars to clouds. Marcus was patient and kind with them, but Sarah often caught glimpses of deep sadness in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. One evening, Marcus came to check on a leaky faucet in their bathroom. As he worked, Emma and Jake told him all about their day at the local elementary school where Sarah had enrolled them. And Tommy Jenkins said his dad has a boat. But I told him Uncle Marcus probably has a bigger one, Jake announced proudly. Marcus smiled, but Sarah noticed it didn't reach his eyes. Boats are nice, but the best adventures happen right here on solid ground. After he finished the repair and the children went to bed, Sarah made coffee for both of them. They sat in the living room by the fireplace, and for once the conversation turned personal. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said carefully. "Of course. That first day at the hospital you mentioned losing someone important to you. I hope I'm not being too forward, but I can tell it still hurts you." Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. Sarah wondered if she had overstepped, but then he began to speak. "Her name was Lisa," he said softly. "We were engaged to be married. She was a teacher, loved kids, wanted a big family. She used to say I worked too much, that I cared more about making money than making memories." He paused, and Sarah could see the pain in his face. "I kept promising her I would slow down, spend more time with her, but there was always another deal, another opportunity. I thought I was building a future for us, but really I was just building walls between us." Sarah waited quietly, sensing there was more to the story. "Lisa got sick," Marcus continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Cancer. She needed me to be there for her, to go to doctor appointments, to just sit with her during treatment. But I kept thinking my business would fall apart if I wasn't constantly managing it. I told myself I was working hard to pay for the best doctors, the best treatment." Tears were running down his face now, and Sarah's heart ached for him. The day she died, I was in a business meeting 3 states away. She called me that morning, said she wasn't feeling well, asked me to come home. I told her I would be there the next day, that this meeting was too important to miss. Marcus covered his face with his hands. She died alone in the hospital while I was arguing about profit margins with people who didn't even matter. The nurses said she kept asking for me until the very end. Sarah felt tears in her own eyes. She reached over and put her hand on Marcus's shoulder. "That was 5 years ago," Marcus said, looking up at her. "I've tried to live differently since then, to remember that money and success don't mean anything if you don't have people to share them with. When I found you and the children in that truck, I saw a chance to do something that actually mattered." Sarah understood now why Marcus had been so determined to help them, why he continued to go out of his way to make sure they were okay. "Lisa would be proud of the man you've become," Sarah said gently. Marcus shook his head. "I don't know about that. I still work too much. I still live alone in that big house. Still don't have the family Lisa wanted us to have. Sometimes I think I'm just going through the motions of being a better person without actually changing anything fundamental about my life." "But you saved us," Sarah pointed out. "You gave us a home, jobs, hope for the future. You spend time with Emma and Jake, and they love you. That's not going through motions, that's choosing to care about people." They talked until late that night, sharing stories about their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Sarah told Marcus about her ex-husband who had left when the children were babies, about the struggle of raising twins alone, about the shame of losing her job and nearly losing her children to the cold. Marcus listened without judgment, offering comfort and understanding. For both of them, it was the first time in years they had opened up completely to another person. Over the following days, something shifted between them. Marcus started staying for dinner more often, helping the children with homework, joining their evening walks around the neighborhood. Sarah found herself looking forward to his visits, enjoying his quiet sense of humor, and the way he made her feel like her opinions and dreams mattered. The children noticed the change too. Emma started drawing pictures that included all four of them together like a family. Jake asked Sarah if Uncle Marcus might want to come to his school's father-son breakfast. Sarah realized she was falling in love with Marcus, but she was terrified to acknowledge it. He had done so much for them already. What if her feelings complicated their arrangement? What if he felt obligated to return her feelings out of kindness? What if he was still too heartbroken over Lisa to consider loving someone else? But as she watched Marcus teaching Jake how to throw a baseball in their small backyard, and as she saw Emma showing him her latest drawings, Sarah couldn't deny the truth any longer. They weren't just grateful to Marcus for saving their lives. They had all started to love him, and despite his lingering guilt over Lisa, Sarah could see that he was beginning to love them back. The question was whether he would allow himself to accept that love and build the family he had always wanted, or whether his past would continue to hold him back from embracing the future that was right in front of him. 2 months after the rescue, Emma and Jake had been planning something special for Marcus. They whispered together when he wasn't around and asked their mother countless questions about colors and words. Sarah could see the excitement building in their eyes every day. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Marcus knocked on their door as usual, expecting to help fix a squeaky cabinet door. Instead, he found Emma and Jake waiting for him with serious expressions on their faces. "Uncle Marcus," Emma said formally, "we need you to sit down. We have something very important to show you." Marcus looked at Sarah, who was standing in the doorway with tears already forming in her eyes. She nodded encouragingly and gestured toward the couch. Jake ran to his bedroom and returned with a small wrapped package. Emma carried a folded piece of paper that looked like it had been worked on very carefully. "We made these for you," Jake announced proudly. "Mom helped us with the spelling, but all the ideas came from our hearts." Emma unfolded her paper first. It was a drawing made with crayons and colored pencils, showing 4 stick figures standing in front of a house. The sun was shining yellow in the corner, and there were flowers drawn around the edges. Above the picture, in her best handwriting, Emma had written, "Our hero. This is you." Emma pointed to the tallest figure, "And this is Mom. And this is me and Jake. We drew us all together because that's how we want it to always be." Marcus studied the drawing carefully. In Emma's innocent artwork, he could see so much love and hope. The stick figure that represented him was smiling and holding hands with the others. Jake couldn't wait any longer and thrust his package toward Marcus. "Open mine. Open mine." Inside the wrapping was a small wooden picture frame that Jake had decorated with stickers and glitter. Inside the frame was a photograph that Sarah had taken without Marcus knowing, showing him reading a bedtime story to both children. Jake had written "Best Daddy Ever" in crayon along the bottom of the frame. "We know you're not really our daddy yet," Jake said seriously, "but you take care of us like one. You make sure we have food and a warm house and toys to play with. You help me with my math homework even when it's really hard." Emma nodded eagerly. "And you never get mad when I ask you a million questions about everything. You always have time to listen to us even when you're busy with grown-up stuff." Marcus felt his throat tighten as he looked at these precious gifts. No expensive present had ever meant as much to him as these simple, heartfelt creations. "But that's not the real surprise," Emma continued, glancing at her mother for encouragement. Sarah stepped forward, her own eyes shining with unshed tears. "Marcus, these children have something they want to ask you." Emma and Jake looked at each other, then stood up straight like they had practiced. "Uncle Marcus," Emma began, her voice small but determined, "we know you're sad sometimes because you miss Lisa. Mom told us that you loved her very much and that she went to heaven before you could get married." Jake nodded solemnly. "We're sorry that happened to you. It must hurt your heart a lot. But," Emma continued, "we think maybe Lisa is watching over you from heaven, and maybe she helped you find us in the snow because she knew you needed a family and we needed you." Marcus's vision blurred as tears began to fall down his cheeks. These children, with their pure hearts and simple wisdom, were saying things that grown-ups with psychology degrees had tried to help him understand. Jake stepped closer and took Marcus's hand in his small one. "We love you, Uncle Marcus. You saved our lives, but you also saved our hearts. Before you found us, we were always worried and scared. Now we feel safe and happy every day." Emma moved to Marcus's other side and put her little arms around his neck. "We want to ask you something really important. Would you maybe want to be our real daddy? Not just Uncle Marcus, but our daddy forever and always?" "We know it's a big question," Jake added quickly, "and you don't have to answer right now if you need to think about it. But we hope you'll say yes because we love you so much." Marcus couldn't speak. He pulled both children into his arms and held them close, sobbing quietly into their hair. These beautiful, brave little souls were offering him the greatest gift he could ever receive. Sarah knelt down beside them and put her arms around all three of them. "We're not trying to replace Lisa in your heart," she said softly. "We know she'll always be special to you, but there's room in hearts for more love, not less. These children have been through so much, and they've never had a father figure who truly cared about them. And I've never had anyone who made me believe in love again," she added, her voice barely a whisper, "until you." Marcus pulled back slightly to look at each of their faces. Emma's eyes were bright with hope. Jake was trying to be brave but clearly nervous about Marcus's answer. Sarah was looking at him with such love and trust that it took his breath away. "Emma, Jake," Marcus said, his voice shaky with emotion, "I would be the luckiest man in the world to be your daddy. There's nothing I want more than to take care of you and love you for the rest of my life." Both children erupted in cheers and threw themselves back into his arms. Sarah was crying openly now, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Really?" Emma asked, as if she couldn't quite believe it. "Really, truly?" "Really, truly," Marcus confirmed, kissing the top of her head. "I love you both so much. You've given my life meaning again. You've taught me what it means to be part of a real family." Jake looked up at him with wide, serious eyes. "Does this mean we can call you Daddy now instead of Uncle Marcus?" "If you want to," Marcus said, his heart full to bursting. "Daddy," Emma said experimentally, testing out the word. Then she smiled the biggest smile Marcus had ever seen. "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." "I like how that sounds." That evening, after the children had fallen asleep, clutching their pictures and talking excitedly about their new daddy, Marcus and Sarah sat together on the porch watching the sunset. "You know," Marcus said quietly, "I think Emma was right about Lisa watching over us. I can almost feel her blessing on this family we're building." Sarah took his hand and squeezed it gently. "She must have been an amazing woman to have loved you so much." "She was," Marcus agreed. "And I think she would love you and the children too. She always said the best things in life were the simple ones. Family, love, being there for the people who matter." 6 months later, Marcus officially adopted Emma and Jake in a courthouse ceremony that was small, but filled with more joy than any grand wedding. The twins wore their best clothes and couldn't stop grinning as the judge made it legal. Emma's drawing of their family still hung on the refrigerator, but now it was surrounded by school photos, report cards, and artwork that showed their life together. Marcus had learned to braid Emma's hair and help Jake with his baseball swing. He attended every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every bedtime story. On the first anniversary of the day he found them in the snow, Marcus woke up to find a new drawing slipped under his bedroom door. This one showed him pulling their truck out of the snow, but instead of looking frightened, the stick figures were all smiling. At the bottom, in Emma's improving handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for saving us and loving us forever." Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, holding the drawing and remembering how empty his life had been just 1 year ago. He had thought that losing Lisa meant he would never have the family they had dreamed of together, but these two precious children had taught him that love doesn't replace love. It multiplies it. His heart was big enough to hold his memories of Lisa and his deep love for his new family. In fact, loving Sarah, Emma, and Jake had made him understand even more deeply how much Lisa had meant to him. As he got dressed and prepared to make breakfast for his family, Marcus smiled at the sound of Emma and Jake giggling in the kitchen with Sarah. The house that had once echoed with loneliness was now filled with the warm sounds of a happy home. He looked at Emma's drawing one more time and whispered, a quiet thank you to Lisa wherever she was, for helping him find his way to this beautiful, chaotic, perfectly imperfect family that had saved his life just as much as he had saved theirs.